In the years following the cataclysm of World War II, as nations lifted themselves from the rubble, a subtle but profound transformation began on the world's railways. The sleek, romantic steam locomotives of the pre-war era, the proud symbols of national industrial might, were gradually being replaced. New designs emerged, strange, streamlined diesels and powerful electric engines that hummed rather than chuffed. This was not merely a story of technological progress, it was a direct consequence of the war itself. The design of trains changed after 1945 because the war had fundamentally reshaped the global landscape. It shattered old empires, redistributed economic power, unleashed new technologies, and scarred the human psyche with the memory of the railway's darkest potential. The story of the post-war train is, in fact, the story of the post-war world. To understand the change, one must first understand the state of the railway on the eve of war. In the 1930s, the steam locomotive was at its zenith. Nations expressed their identity through steel and smoke. Germany built the high-speed flying hamburger diesel train, a precursor of things to come, but also the massive BR-05 steam locomotives, symbols of Nazi engineering prowess. France showcased its elegance with the Bugatti-designed autorails. In the United States, Art Deco streamliners like the Mercury and the Broadway Limited captured the public's imagination, promising a future of speed and comfort. But beneath this glamour lay an industry that was, in many ways, technologically conservative. Steam power was inherently inefficient, demanding vast amounts of water and coal and requiring immense manpower for maintenance. The railways were also the undisputed masters of land transport. They moved the goods, the people, and the mail. This monopoly was absolute, and it bred a certain complacency. The war would shatter that complacency forever. Between 1939 and 1945, the world's railways were conscripted for total war. They became the arteries of the war machine, and their failure meant the failure of armies. The German Blitzkrieg was utterly dependent on the Reichsbahn to deliver men and materiel to the front. The Soviet Union's entire war effort relied on the heroic efforts of its railway troops, who rebuilt shattered tracks under fire to supply the front and evacuate entire factories to the east. In the vast spaces of the Soviet Union and North Africa, the side that could best project logistical power along steel rails held a decisive advantage. But the war also exposed the vulnerabilities of steam. Locomotives were high-priority targets for fighter bombers. Coaling stations and water towers were critical choke points. The sheer volume of traffic, moving on tight, unbreakable schedules, pushed pre-war equipment to its absolute limits and beyond. The railways were run into the ground. By 1945, Europe's rail network was a devastated landscape of bombed-out marshalling yards, shattered bridges, and worn-out, battered locomotives. The system was exhausted. While the railways of Europe and Asia lay in ruins, a different story was unfolding in the United States. Isolated from the bombing campaigns that ravaged other continents, American industry boomed. And it was here that a rival technology, once confined to niche duties, was perfected and proven on a massive scale: the diesel locomotive. The diesel's advantages were precisely what the wartime experience had shown were critical. It was incredibly efficient, using cheap, readily available heavy fuel oil instead of high-grade coal. It had immense range, needing water only for its crew, not its engine. It could be started and stopped instantly, unlike a steam locomotive which required hours to build a fire. Most importantly for war-shattered economies, it required a fraction of the maintenance and manpower. A single diesel could do the work of 2 or 3 steam locomotives with one crew. For nations facing a crippling labor shortage and destroyed infrastructure, the economic argument was overwhelming. The war had proven the need for efficiency and resilience, and the diesel delivered it. The war also acted as a massive forced laboratory for new technologies. The immense industrial effort to build tanks, ships, and aircraft led to revolutionary advances in metallurgy, welding techniques, and engine design. The lightweight, high-strength alloys developed for aircraft found their way into the construction of new, lighter rail cars. The powerful compact diesel engines perfected for American submarine chasers and landing craft were directly adapted for locomotive use. The war also accelerated the development of electrical engineering. The need for vast amounts of electricity for aluminum production and other war industries led to the expansion and hardening of national power grids. After the war, this existing electrical infrastructure made the prospect of widespread railway electrification, a clean, powerful, and efficient system, suddenly much more economically viable, especially in power-rich but coal-poor countries like France, Switzerland, and Sweden. The war didn't just create a need for new trains, it created the very tools to build them. Perhaps the most profound and least spoken of reason for the change in train design was a psychological one. The steam locomotive, for all its romance, was inextricably linked to the horrors of the recent past. Its iconic image was now paired with other, darker images. It was the steam train that had pulled the long, grim cattle cars to the gates of Auschwitz and Treblinka. It was the instrument of the Holocaust, the logistics of genocide. The sight of a steam locomotive, the sound of its whistle, the smell of its smoke, these sensory experiences could no longer be separated from the memory of mass deportation and industrial murder. Furthermore, the steam engine represented the old nationalistic order that had plunged the world into war twice in a generation. The new, cleaner, quieter, and more internationalist designs of the post-war era represented a conscious break from that past. They were symbols of a modern, forward-looking, and hopefully more peaceful future, one built on economic cooperation and technological progress, not nationalist aggression. This new future was embodied by new trains on new missions. In 1951, just 6 years after the war, the French National Railways launched the first SNCF-class CC 7100 electric locomotive, a design that would break world speed records. This was not for national glory, but to showcase French engineering and attract international business. In 1955, the same class would hit 331 kilometers per hour, an astonishing achievement. Meanwhile, the newly formed Deutsche Bundesbahn in West Germany, eager to distance itself from the imagery of the Third Reich, embraced a new, clean, functionalist design language for its locomotives and carriages. But the most powerful symbol of the post-war railway was the Trans-Europe Express, TEE. Initiated in 1957, the TEE network was a direct product of the European coal and steel community, the precursor to the European Union. It was a fleet of luxurious international diesel and electric trains that connected the major cities of Western Europe, requiring no border formalities. Here was a train designed not for war, but for peace, business, and cultural exchange, literally building bridges between nations that had been mortal enemies just a decade before. The change was not immediate, but it was inexorable. Throughout the 1950s and 1960s, the dieselization of railways swept across North America and Europe. Great Britain, the birthplace of the steam locomotive, ran its last official mainline steam service in 1968, the 15 Guinea Special, a funeral for an era. In the United States, the giants of steam were almost entirely gone by the mid-1950s, replaced by the colorful, ubiquitous diesels of General Motors, General Electric, and Alco. This transition was the most visible sign of a deeper shift. The war had broken the old world, and in its place, a new one was being built. The post-war train was a product of that new world, more efficient, more international, and consciously designed to forget the soot and the smoke of the past. It was a machine built not for empire, but for commerce and connection. The reason train design changed after World War II is because the world itself had been fundamentally redesigned. The railway, which had been an instrument of industrial warfare, was repurposed as an engine of peace and a symbol of a hopeful, if cautious, new beginning.